When restraints on evil are removed. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. California pastor John MacArthur, in talking about rioting in the streets in the summer of 2020, gives a powerful 90-minute sermon with the following conclusion. This is what happens when restraints on evil are removed. He points out that historically, three things have constrained society. Number one, individuals were restrained by guilt. But the be yourself relativism of today not only fails to discourage aberrant behavior, it encourages it. Number two, the church restrained bad behavior via conformity. But the church is not as powerful as it used to be, says John MacArthur. His third point, the government restrained via force. But last summer, police stood by and followed the lead of Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, who said, quote, "We gave those who wished to destroy space to do that," end quote. John MacArthur's right. When restraints on evil are removed, you get evil. Here's how it applies to Christian economics. We assume it's a fallen world. Milton Friedman said, most economic myths are based on the incorrect assumption of zero-sum economics. Friedman was an atheist. I'm a Christian. So I say that most economic myths stem from a denial of the fallen nature. Economics is about the production and distribution of goods in a scarce environment. Without the fall, there's no scarcity. So there's no economics. When you deny the fall, bad economic policy is the result. This is where economics and politics nicely dovetail. John Adams said, if men were angels, government would not be necessary. And Milton Friedman asked Phil Donahue 180 years later, where are you going to get these angels to operate this utopian system of yours? The answer to both questions is the same. People are fallen. When you deny the fallen nature, you make bad political and economic decisions. As I pointed out in a faculty meeting this week, the entire discipline of auditing assumes a fallen nature. If people weren't fallen, why would you audit them? Subpoint number one, a remarkable achievement. Dennis Prager, writing in the publication this week, Right and Free, takes on the subject of the fallen nature of humans in an article titled, Given How Flawed Human Nature Is, America Has Been a Remarkable Moral Achievement. Those who acknowledge how flawed human nature is compare America to reality. Those who do not compare America to some utopian image, a country free of inequality, prejudices, intolerance, sexual misbehavior, greed, etc. This divide helps explain why those who hold a biblical worldview, usually religious Jews and Christians, are more likely to appreciate America than those who do not. It is fundamental to Judaism and Christianity, writes Dennis Prager, that, quote, the will of man's heart is evil from his youth, and Prager takes that from Genesis 8:21. Prager goes on to list 6 evils. 1, a yearning for power over others. 2, a yearning for fame and recognition. 3, a yearning to feel and be considered important and morally superior. 4, the sex drive. 5, greed. 6, ingratitude. Enough from Dennis Prager for today. Subpoint called Dark Agenda. Agnostic Jew David Horowitz explains it this way in a radio interview, quote, the big problem we face in the world is us. And I think every Christian knows that we are sinners, that one of the Protestant ideas is salvation by faith. Hold it. You realize I'm still quoting agnostic Jew David Horowitz here. He says, we are so flawed in our beings, so prone to sin and temptation, that none of us deserves to get to heaven, and that we can only get there by divine grace. It's a very powerful, profound idea. That's the end of a quote from agnostic Jew David Horowitz. This agnostic Jew may understand the Christian worldview better than many Christians. Horowitz continues, quote, why do we have a system of checks and balances? Because the founders didn't trust the people. They felt they had to be restrained, thus my topic today. End quote from David Horowitz. You cannot understand economics without understanding the fallen nature of humans. In his book, David Horowitz's book called Dark Agenda, The War to Destroy Christian America, he further states, quote, "It is also the Christian view. The post-Edenic world," meaning post-Eden, "is a fallen place, irreparably damaged by the corruption of human hearts, so that no human agency can heal it," end quote, agnostic Jew David Horowitz. Subpoint, a lack of economic restraints. So how does this apply to economics? Well, the lack of restraint is what we're seeing today. In the last 8 months, the U.S. Congress has approved multiple stimulus expenditures that indicate they are not moored in reality. Congress is going to approve a $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus bill this week, as I'm recording this, in March of 2021. First, stimulus does not work, but that takes some time and some economic graphs to show. Milton Friedman proved the inaccuracies of the Phillips curve 40 years ago. Employment returns to its natural rate after the stimulus wears off. And with the employment at 6.2%, stimulus is not needed to get it back to the desired level of 5. Another podcast is necessary to explain all those details. But for today, 1.9 trillion divided by 141 million taxpayers means each of us just took on $13,500 debt this week. Worse yet, 47% of those 141 million tax filers pay no tax. So that means each taxpayer took on $27,000 of debt this week. Can you see why my title is When Restraints on Evil Are Removed? Look, the government has no money. It only takes from productive parties and transfers it to others. The government has no money. Okay, is stimulus evil? Well, it's certainly not in alignment with Christian economic principles. The government must take before it can give. There are many biblical commands to give, but no biblical commands to take. That's why it's evil. Since my college sophomores were born, U.S. debt has grown from $5 trillion to almost $28 trillion. From $5,000 per citizen to $84,000 per citizen. That's 130% of GDP, up from 60% when they were born just 20 years ago. Modern monetary theory says you can increase the money supply without causing inflation or debt. That idea is totally unmoored from reality, as I explained in podcast 31, titled The Myth of Modern Monetary Theory. It's the greatest example of what happens when restraints are removed, as John MacArthur pointed out in his very good sermon. Subpoint, men had forgotten God. When asked to sum up the evil that was perpetrated in the Gulag system of the Soviet Union, Alexander Solzhenitsyn stated, men had forgotten God. That's it. 4 words. Men had forgotten God. Notice the form of his answer. He uses the term forgotten to assume they knew God at one point, but they had forgotten God. And an estimated 40 million people died under the gun or by forced starvation in the Soviet system. Subtitle, Men Without Chests. Joe Carter at the Acton Institute writes, Men Without Chests is the curious title of the first chapter of C.S. Lewis's book, The Abolition of Man. In the book, Lewis explains that the chest is one of the indispensable liaison officers between cerebral man and visceral man. It may even be said that it is by this middle element that man is man, for by his intellect he is mere spirit, and by his appetite mere animal. Without chests, we are unable to have confidence that we can grasp objective reality and objective truth, says Joe Carter at the Acton Institute. The result of such chestless education, as C.S. Lewis warns, is a dystopian future. Quote, we make men without chests and expect from them virtue and enterprise, says C.S. Lewis. He goes on to say, we laugh then at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst, end quote. What was C.S. Lewis saying? He was restating my title today, When Restraints on Evil Are Removed. Look, when I explained a particularly bothersome, almost violent interaction I encountered with another person, when I explained it to my co-author, Sergei Sedamatov, who helped me write the book Biblical Economic Policy, Sergei calmly replied, I guess that's what we should expect in a fallen world. That's the understatement of the century. But Sergei's right. What should we expect in a fallen world? In my little book, Economics in the Christian Worldview, I wrote, quote, utopian plans are not in our wheelhouse, end quote. That's why podcast 34 is titled No Utopia. That's because we live in a fallen world. The sooner our economic leaders acknowledge that, the sooner our macroeconomic policies will return to this world. Restraints on evil have been removed. Let's pray they return. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our slogan is Fear God, Tell the Truth, Earn a Profit. See you next time.